Let's head to the phones, talk a little political news. Matt Mackowiak joins us, GOP political strategist. Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well. You haven't been thrown off any United flights lately, have you?
I was actually on a overbooked flight yesterday morning back from D.C., and I had a minor meltdown, and I kind of barely got home. It took some real work, so I can absolutely identify with this viral story this morning.
Yeah. Was it on a United flight?
No, it was on American, but they put me on a United flight, and when they did that, that flight was overbooked as well.
Jeez, yeah,
so,
wow,
yeah.
Not a good day for the flying industry. Let's start off. You include this in your morning email that you sent out, and it's Trump promised a border wall. Now these Texans worry the government will take their land. It's a story out of the L.A. Times. How big is this this idea about eminent domain and Texans when it comes to the border wall? How big of a predicament do you think the government will face here when it comes to a border wall, if there is one big border wall across the entire southern border?
Yeah, it certainly is an issue, and I've been of the opinion for some time, written about this in my column, the Austin American Statesman, and talked about it many places, that I don't believe ultimately they'll have a border wall over the entire border because of how rugged some of the terrain is, how rural part of it is. You've got mountains that are 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 feet in the air. It'd be hard to put a wall at the top of that. It's hard to put a wall in the middle of a river. But in the urban areas, I do think you're going to have a wall like what Trump has promised. And in some of those areas, you have privately owned land. And so if the person won't sell, or if the person owns land on both sides of the border, maybe they don't want to have it subdivided. What do you do? And that is a situation where eminent domain is an option. It's one that will not be popular to those landowners. It's one that will tie some aspects of the border wall up into litigation that could last several years. I think it's a real issue. There's no question it's a real issue. For that land that's privately owned, if the landowner won't sell, if they choose not to sell, then eminent domain is the only option that remains for the government if they want to go ahead and pursue an option to build on that land. So it is a challenge. There's no question.
And I believe the state, or at least Ken Paxton's already come out and said, because this would be for government safety and safety overall, eminent domain, he at least, it seemed to back the idea of using eminent domain, something that Republicans aren't generally in favor of, right?
That's right. And I believe he issued a legal opinion saying that eminent domain is appropriate in this case. And if you think about why eminent domain exists, it's not so the government can steal property from private individuals for no reason. It's for when the purpose of that property would be for the public good. And in this case, I think you can make a pretty strong argument that strengthening border security, it would be good for not just that individual, but also for that community and for our state and for our country, and for thousands, if not millions of Americans. So I think that it probably fits within the legal justification that's required for eminent domain to be used. But obviously, it will get tied up in litigation.
Yeah. Visiting with Matt Mackowiak, let's take a look at the national scene in Congress. Congress on a little bit of a break right now, and we're getting closer to Trump's first 100 days in office. There's a story from, I believe it's the Associated Press, that the president is scrapping his tax plan. The timetable's threatened on that. Obviously, you have the fumble of the health care replacement plan of Obamacare from the Republicans. You have Neil Gorsuch. That's a victory right there. Neil Gorsuch sworn in today on the Supreme Court. But is there anything Republicans can really point to as big victories when they go back home to their districts?
Look, I think it's fair to say that legislatively there have not been any major victories. Now, that doesn't mean there haven't been victories. You're right to point to the confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, who will be sworn in here at the top of the hour at the White House. Obviously, President Trump made a difficult and consequential decision as it related to Syria late last week. But on top of that, I mean, you have the Keystone Pipeline moving forward. You have the Congressional Review Act that's been used several times to loosen regulations instituted by the Obama administration to strengthen the economy and grow jobs. And of course, you have a number of things that are being worked on. Immigration and border security is being worked on. Tax reform is being worked on. Even health care, they haven't given up. They're continuing to discuss that. What's also interesting here, Chad, is at the end of the month, you have two important deadlines. You have the debt ceiling, and you also have the funding of government, which runs out. And so if they don't pass a funding bill, even a short-term one, you could have a government shutdown. So we are at around day 80 of the 100, the so-called 100 days, first 100 days of the new president. And so if there's very limited time left before those 100 days are up, with Congress taking this 2-week break here in the middle of April.
Matt, before I let you go, I just want your ideas on what Donald Trump's foreign policy looks like or may look like, because over the weekend, I'm sure you saw that there were news reports where you had Republicans and Democrats, some praising Trump's actions in Syria, but you also have some of the base of Trump, the Laura Ingrams, the Ann Coulters, who are saying, "Hey, remember America first." In my opinion, when I think America first, that doesn't mean isolationism, but there are some who say that is what it means. What do you think Trump's foreign policy is? What do you think? How does it connect with that America first, slogan that he had?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do believe he intended to be more isolationist than what we saw in Syria this past week. I think he was very much emotionally affected by the images he saw from the chemical weapons attack, and I think he also liked very much that he could demonstrate decisiveness and action and leadership after 8 years of Obama's fecklessness and dithering. So I don't think we're going to see large-scale wars in the Middle East with huge troop presences from this president. But look, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, and every president is confronted with crises and situations that make them have to adapt. And I think that's what you saw with Trump. I think he's very worried and very concerned about North Korea. That could require an even more aggressive action. It's just a totally different situation when you're sitting behind the Resolute desk as President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief, and I think that's what we're seeing. I don't think we know what his foreign policy is yet, Chad. I think it's still in formation. I think they're still trying to all get on the same page. They have an excellent national security and military team, but I think that this president is going to look at every situation on a case-by-case basis, and I think that's what we saw in Syria.
Do you think there is that inner struggle within the White House?
Among the senior staff, I think that is happening. I think definitely that's happening, particularly between Kushner and Bannon. We'll see how that gets resolved. Ultimately, I just think the president's not going to fire his son-in-law. I think Kushner's here to stay, and so Bannon either needs to figure out a way to work with him, or he needs to maybe go to the outside group that might be providing political cover and support for Trump's agenda. That might be a better fit.
Matt, tell folks what they can hear on your podcast and what your latest article is.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find all my podcasts and my commentary with the Washington Times at M-A-C-K on politics.com. Latest podcast episode features former U.S. Senator Jim Talent of Missouri and the author Gordon Chang, and we talk about Syria, North Korea, China, all these foreign crises. You can check all that out, MacOnPolitics.com. It's also available in the iTunes store.
Wonderful. Matt, thank you very much. We'll visit next week.
Sounds good. Take care.
Have a good one. That's Matt Mackowiak.